welcome to Friday night's video in our second master series. I do believe this is the 58th video in our second master series, the 7th video I believe on our basic processors, and the 6th video on deal with equalizers. So I really hope that I made it really clear in that last video when we talked about your opinion some more to really help you become that next level master audio engineer. The comical thing that last video might have been might really help it to sink in that the work has to be done on your part to get you to that next level, to help formulate your own opinion of how things would be done. And it's very difficult to teach people that, but getting you to understand that, to help you get over that hurdle and get you experimenting to honing your opinion is of utmost importance. And we talked about the basic automation work that we can do across tracks and things like that that are going to be a work in progress for you, but are going to help take your stuff to that next level by really making every moment in time of utmost importance and flagging things and seeing what you can fix with your automation to make things as good as they possibly can in your opinion. All right, so in this video, we're going to talk about something really messed up. So if that didn't throw you for a loop, this one certainly will. So in the last master series, we talked about sound sculpting. And equalization is one of the biggest tools you have to sound sculpt, which sounds funny, but you just put a high or low pass filter on something and you'll understand that you're doing sound sculpting and how aggressively it can affect the sound. So, and that can be, with harmonics also, the third harmonic, if you fuss with it, boost it, subtract it, automate it, that it's going to change the sound. It's like I got Bob here. To give you an example, that Bob's singing here, I've had him hold one note, like we talked about getting test captured. You can go back and watch the first master series, that you'll understand why we got the second master series to address this a little bit more in depth. That this harmonic in Bob's voice, he's this country guy, and he's like, yeah, and he's gotten this sound. Well, it's his sound, so it's like you can't mess his sound up. So we're going to address two issues here. The first issue is that Bob sounds like Country Bumpkin, and if you screw with his sound, he's going to sound like Dinkus from the R&B album, with all due respect, or Bob, from the rock thing. He's got a distinct sound, so you don't want to fuss with it too much, because then you screw up his sound. So you have to take that into consideration first and foremost. And anytime you mess with that kind of stuff, be real careful and real cautious and include them in it as you fuss with that stuff, so that even though it might be your opinion, it might not be his opinion, and you will be wasting your time trying to fuss with this stuff, and on top of it, changing the sound of it too much. He's got a whiny sound around 500 hertz that it's boosting around there that makes his sound like that, and you can't really screw that up too much. You can enhance it and you can attenuate it some if it's really bad, to try to help it sound good in the production. So really keep that in mind. The second thing is that along those same lines is that this harmonic in his voice sounds off. It just does. And I throw an equalizer on there and I get something like this, and I go find that harmonic and I attenuate that harmonic. And all of a sudden, it sounds much better. His whole sound, that test capture, I've got him held that, it sounds awesome. It's like, oh yeah, that's what it did. You had that, or I might have a couple of the primary harmonics. Normally, the first 9 or 10, maybe 12 harmonics are normally the fundamental ones you're dealing with. And then you're dealing with stuff like this. You'll start dealing with stuff like this, broadening, using wider bands to deal with anything up above that, because it starts getting really close together and really hard to automate to try to fix that kind of stuff. So you'll be dealing with wider bands as you start dealing with upper end stuff most of the time. So kind of keep that in mind. But as an example, we've attenuated that and that's fixed his sound. Now, the concept here is that this is part of sound sculpting. So this would be really before your equalization, because if you do this in your sound sculpting stage before you get to equalization, that you're going to really have it in your mind that you're not trying to completely equalize his voice. You're targeting problem harmonics and things like that. the first thing you're targeting problem harmonics like we talked about there, and you might be targeting, like you got this little boost right here in his voice, and you're going to use an EQ like this to try to deter that a little bit and bring that down some. For some reason in his voice, now it sounds awesome, bro. You've done just two little slight EQ things that for his voice, it just sounds great. And that's sound sculpting. That's not so much equalization, because we have not dealt with, we've done a little bit of sweep EQ work kind of thing like we're looking at it here. But for the most part, that those two kind of things work together a little bit. And so we cross the line between sound sculpting and equalization here. But this would be done first before equalization. So the concept here is that once I've found those two spots, you know, I've got all, you see that I've got I've got this many EQs across there for dealing a high and low end boost, for dealing the first few harmonics, for dealing with the next few harmonics, for dealing with the next few harmonics, and a lot of times I'll break this down and change this to something like this that's wider band for things that I got going on in the upper end, depending on how detailed work I can do and how bad it is. Does that make sense? Because there's been a couple times I'll find some one little harmonic down in here, like in here, and I'm going, well, I got no choice. That's one harmonic. It's like right in here, and it's really causing a problem. I mean, I found it, I swept around, I found it, and that's it right there. And well, I can't wideband that or anything, so I don't have no choice but try to really target in there, which is a great excuse for you to buy better EQs. So, yeah, does that make sense? So, this concept is really simple. Most of the time, there's not a whole lot of work that happens here. It's not like you get in there and you're going to be using every one of these nodes across here and every one of them subtracting and attenuating all over the place, and then on top of it have a couple more EQs or something like this going on. Normally, it's not that bad. Normally, and no matter what instrument you're dealing with, it's pretty simple. You've got a couple harmonics normally, and maybe some more wideband stuff in the upper end that you need to deal with that might be like this little area right here. You see that right there, and I've attenuated that. It was poking up a little bit, and that might have been a problem, and now it sounds awesome. Now, it's pretty simple with this static sound like or something like that to target those things and then automate it. So here's the kicker. Now what you have to do once you've found these spots that are the problem, and this takes a lot of experimentation on your part, you have to trust me on this, but we've talked about mapping out footprints and things like that so we know what we're looking for and things like that. Now when we're doing this, we got this other thing that we have to do. Now we have to go, like, let's say this is the performance here. We have to go find a note somewhere on there that's matching up with this. Not necessarily the same note, but something, you know, that's a note that's being held. So we can go focus and target on those same harmonics and those same wideband areas and attenuate and boost them how we had done on this area. So this is a little complicated, but once we've done that, what we do is we take this EQ setup and we go to this track that is the performance track, and then we do EQ. Normally what that works out to, there's a few ways to do it, but normally what I'll do is I'll go in there with a couple different things. Most of the time I keep it pretty static, otherwise it gets really complicated. And I do my automation EQ like we talked about in the last video with my static EQ work and my equal loudness contour work and my sweep EQ work from those. But this is most of the time a static EQ that you know that they need to be boosted or attenuated so much throughout the entire performance. Does that make sense? So you're dealing with a certain frequency, a certain amount of boost or attenuation that's throughout the whole performance. Because whether or not the guy's singing or that more than likely the same attenuation and boost from the same frequency content is going to be consistent most of the time, fairly inconsistent, and your equalization will pick up any inconsistencies in the next phases of equalization. So what we need to do is slow it down so we can deal with that. So what do? Basically, what you're looking at doing is slowing it down. You should have a speed up or slow down in your DAW. You're not going to hear things correctly, but that's not the point. You know, it doesn't matter whether it sounds going, that's okay. It doesn't matter because you're trying to automate to follow a certain frequency. That way you can get in there and you got Bob that's singing. It's going really slow instead of fast. And as this one harmonic that we targeted this one harmonic, it's going to move around. So you got it moving really slow. You've set up your equalization so that you can draw equalization, and then you've automated that parameter. Let's say it's this one, the gain on it, or the frequency. So you automate the frequency on it. Does that make sense? You automate it, and then you set it up to follow it. So then you start it, and it's going slow, and as that one frequency moves around, you follow it as close as you can, and it'll automatically draw automation to follow it around, whether or not he's going up in the frequency realm or down in the frequency realm, that you're following that one frequency or that one harmonic or that one band around. Well, you've automated it to follow it around. And then once you get done and you've set up that automation, what you do is go back and bring it back up to speed how it's supposed to be. And then what should happen is you can turn on your EQ and watch it follow it around. The automation will, as that frequency right there, he's singing ah, and then when he goes to ah, this goes follows it up and then follows it back down and follows it up here and follows it around there, follows it all over the place. Then you just set up how much you're going to attenuate and boost it and leave it. Does that make sense? And you will be amazed at how much that can help you. It can help you immensely to where you've just done, it may not seem like much, but you have immensely helped that production. And it doesn't take that much. So the next thing, you can do that with all kinds of them. What normally you will have is, let's say this equalization goes like this. So if I go in here and I'm going to freehand this, and let's say I freehand that and it's going like this, right? I've automated it, and like we talked about, but it comes out looking like this. Normally what you got to do is you go in there and you've got a node that you set up a node somewhere before the automation actually started. Then you go in there and you copy it. Command copy it, and then what you do is you have your equalizer that you had set up on there, and let's say you had this band that you had done that with, right? And you automated that. Now you want to automate this one, or let's say this one here. So you're going to edit that automation, right? So you'd want it to follow it the same because the gaps will stay the same as they move around, just a different frequency. So then you'd go in here, you'd place that node there, command paste it, and then you'd have that other automation visibly around so you could match it up. So basically what you got going on is you've got this happening. What will happen here is if I go in here and I do this to it, I can see that you can see it in gray where the automation is. So you want to line this up to where you see the gray automation from the other line. It's the same contour you want to follow. Now you line it up with that, then you get out your EQ and you sit there and you do this, which is kind of messed up, but you find where that other node is, you watch it as it goes around, and you've got that moving around, but you want it to follow it the same, but it's a different frequency. So I've got this yellow one here and it's moving around. So if I move it up or down, if I move it down, you see it moving way down here now. So I want to move it to where it's riding, the same automation, but riding above the frequency that I want it to. Does that make sense? But following the same automation. And then they'll follow each other whenever this harmonic moves, the other harmonic's going to move with it. And so then they move together, and you've automated them together so that they're attenuating and boosting together as it moves around, whether or not it's this kind of automation or you're dealing with this kind of stuff. And it's a pretty simple thing. It's not that complicated. Once you get a workflow going, that you'll be amazed at how much it will help you. I mean, it will help you do your sculpting immensely. And most of the time, it's not that difficult. It's pretty simple work. But sometimes it is kind of a lot of work, but that just depends. And it really depends on how much time you spend really focusing on doing as good a job as you can. So that is basically the sound sculpting area of your automation, and you need to take that information and start applying it and experimenting with it and perfecting it. You can PM me with any questions you have, but it's a pretty simple concept. Peace, self-love. I certainly hope you enjoyed this video, and I'll see you in the next one.